Уважаемые коллеги, дорогие друзья, добрый день. Начинаем нашу работу.
Dear friends, we're happy to begin our work. So we understand the plenary session will come to the end soon, and the audience and the participants will join us. The topic of our off-site session of the Ministry of Trade and Industry is the foreign trade in new reality, and it is hosted with hospitable support of the Ministry of Economic and Foreign Economic Relations and Congress activity of Bashkortostan. This year, our country faced serious challenges and tasks, and the government rapidly initiated measures of regulatory support, offer financial support for the participants of external economic relations to be able to adjust to existing reality. And the support of external economic relations became really very important because logistic chains were violated, the Western companies left or are leaving Russia, and on the one hand, it gives opportunities for our domestic businesses to localize the production, and also the task for the government is to support the consumer market, and some measures that had not been used before in Russia, like parallel import, were created. And I would like to introduce our participants. The first Deputy Minister of External Economic Relations and Congress Activity, Elena Izotova. The Russian Export Center shall be represented by Andrei Zaitsev, Director on Regional Development of Businesses. Online, we will have the head of our dedicated institution, the Center of External Economic Relations Support, Alexei Kim. And we have Mr. Abbas, the official representative of Commerce and Industry Chamber of Iran in Russia. From Abu Dhabi, our trade representative, Andrei Terukhin, will join us. And Maria Suvorovskaya will tell us about the activity of the Russian-Turkish dialogue, because she is the CEO and chief editor of Dialogue Media. And also online, we will have the Senator Konstantin Dolgov. And first of all, I would like to give floor to Yelena Izotova. We understand that Bashkortostan is unprecedented leader of industrial production. A lot of measures of support have been elaborated. Please tell us how effective these measures are and to what extent business considers this work as effective. Thank you very much. Let me welcome everyone on behalf of the government of Bashkortostan for coming to our 15th anniversary International Business Week and for visiting our session under the auspices of the Ministry of Industry and Trade of Russian Federation. And the first slide that we see here is true. It's our cooperative effort with the Ministry of Trade and Industry of Russia and the Russian Export Center. From 2017, we have started the cooperative work with the Russian Export Center. We signed the first agreement. And in this relation, we have established the representative office of the Russian Export Center in Ufa. And for 5 years in a row, December 8th, our Ministry of External Economic Relations celebrated the 5 years of our operation in external market under the auspices of the new ministry. Primarily, the first Ministry of External Economic Relations was founded in 1991. So we have a long-lasting history. If we look at the outcome of the operation for 9 months, we see that export is growing by 17%, regardless of the fact that we are under sanctions, and regardless of the years of COVID. And this situation, together with our business, we provide support to our companies. and we help them to find the new markets. Now we have 114 countries, 113 countries, and if we look back at the results of 2021, we used to have 121 countries. Now we have 113 countries. We are growing. We used to have 109 countries, and now we have 113 countries. And by the end of the year, we will get back to the same number of our partner countries. And even though we lost some countries, we are replacing them with other countries. At the moment, in the framework of the national project, we are implementing the standard 2.0, and so we have a very good indicator. We are in top 3 with 97%, and implementing this indicator, it's a demonstration of the fact that we're here for a long time and we've been working productively, and we are the first region that implemented the years of support, and it was the subsidy for logistics. Our companies, we were the first. There were some first companies that received subsidies for logistics in September. It was 30 million rubles. And by December, we were unable to distribute this money. Just imagine, it's the 20th of December, and we cannot distribute this money. What are we supposed to do? Because we have not accrued this money, so we started to call the companies, and we distributed this money. So for the next year, we were planning to have 80 million of subsidies. In 2020, we managed to distribute this money during 3 months. So, and if we look at this year, in 2021, this subsidy amount was about 350 million in general for logistics, certification, and export cashback. And this year, for transportation logistics, we were able to distribute the money during 1 week. So the companies know, earlier when we used to call the companies, they were trying to understand what this subsidy is. But if the government gives something for free, then it will mean that the government will get this for free. But when they understood that the subsidy is provided, so it means that the companies will get something and we do not need anything in return. We provide support. And next year, once they know it, they come and address, and they call us asking, when are we going to have this second tranche of this subsidy? So from January, they are waiting for this money to arrive, and they are asking whether they are going to get this money or not. So we understand this measure is needed. It's really effective, and once the Russian Export Center gives such subsidies, and for the small and medium-sized businesses, it will be easier to get the subsidy. As for the other projects, the rapid export help. So we've been telling about this, but in reality, this is really an operating project. The Republic of Bashkortostan, I have already visited the session of Armenia. I would say that Armenia is not a very big country. We are a constituent territory of the Russian Federation, but we are bigger in terms of size and in terms of population. But not everyone will visit too far, and not everyone will start asking about export. And let me even add more information. We have more Armenians than in Armenia. And that is why we travel to the remote areas, to remote places of our republic, and we come and tell them we are ready to come, we are ready to help. And, I approach them saying, explaining them about export. They're saying, so we have nothing to do with export, and we are selling in the domestic market. But once we start explaining, by the end of the conversation, they're saying, we will come for this support. And there are so many cases of this kind. The people used to chase the train and get into the last train. For example, if I enter the business mission, at the last moment people call and they want to join the business mission. And we're saying we will not be able to provide you meetings, but they're saying we're ready to go with you. Even without any meetings, we're ready to go and have a look around. And of course, we will get the response from our companies, and so we see the result. And such rapid expert help allows us to take people to business missions, to organize meetings, to arrange meetings. And this year we organized it to Armenia. And you see, Armenians came and visited us after we visited them. So far, they were interested in our companies. They got interested in this. And so by means of the Export Support Center, we can arrange the group stand, and we can take them to exhibitions. With for the companies, it's not very difficult to do. It's not just the participation at the exhibition, and we arrange the B2B negotiations for them. We invite the potential partners. So not just to be the exhibitors, but also to hold different export contracts. And those figures that we see demonstrate and account for the fact that we do have the export contracts. And the most important thing is that today you go, but tomorrow there will be no contract. Being an expert in this field, in external economic relations, I would tell you that this is not the work for one day. And when people say, you took them to Armenia, but where are the export contracts? They would say, in 1 year, in 2. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing. When we speak about the market, it's the new market we're going to invade. We need to adjust the good. We need to adjust the goods for the market. We need to study the market. But as soon as you proceed with negotiations, the legislation is different, the services will be different, and we need to come to an agreement about the services and the contract. So far, it's a long-lasting period. It does not mean that you want to start exporting and tomorrow you will export. It's a long-lasting work, but we are ready to help you with this. Thank you very much. So it's really a large effort, and the government provides the measures of support for expansion of production and for business, especially at the external markets, to create more jobs, for taxes to be increased as far as inflow of taxes and the profits for businesses. Hence, we're speaking about the measures of support that this year have been transformed. Some of the requirements to exporters were simplified. We have reduced some indicators. Having sold for 1 ruble of subsidies, it was quite a difficult thing to do. Everything was simplified, and the transportation subsidy that you've mentioned is now associated with the compensation model. And once demonstrating the cost for the goods dispatched, next year the companies will have the ability to control the cost and to cover the cost. And more detailed about the measures of support from our speaker from Russian Export Center. The floor is yours. Can you hear me? In continuation of what has been said, here we would like everyone to have the same understanding of the fact that the export support, country-wise, is not something separated from the production and economy. Export in Russia, if we look at export in general in Russian Federation, it would be about 30% of the overall GDP of the country. And the export support and the support for exporters, to each of them in particular, is the support of economy country-wise. And any exporter for any constituent territory of the Russian Federation is not just associated with the taxes to the budget, but also job creation. This is really very important from the point of view of social orientation. And this year, for export, the year was kind of very interesting, even more interesting than 2020, because in 2020, with regards of pandemics, Everyone faced an issue related to logistics because in some cases logistics completely stopped, but then the transport corridors started its movement and gradually it started to get normalized. But this year, in the light of sanction policy on our country, many export flows in the Russian Federation stopped because it's not a secret for anyone that the Northwest Federal District was mainly oriented on export to European Union. And in many indicators, Europe imposed sanctions on import of products from the Russian Federation. So far, many companies were in a position whether they reorient to other markets, sales markets, or they will have to reduce the volumes of production with all the outcoming circumstances and outcomes. So dismiss of the people, or they will have to suspend the personnel. And starting from March, the main idea from the point of view of transformation and support measures and adaptation to new realities, we decided to rely on two main directions. The first one, the one that we faced, and all the exporters faced, was assistance and support in approaching new markets, and the second would be support in solving the issues with logistics. So far, in terms of search of new customers and new markets, this year we have relaunched the model of search of potential partners via our own representative offices abroad and also with the support of trade representations of the Russian Federation abroad. And we have separated the search of potential customers into three main units. The first one would be the top-level search, when the client or the exporter or potential exporter would be able to receive the list of the cold contacts online in terms of the country of interest, about the information about the companies that are known to procure products at the friendly country market. The second would be the detailed search, when we do the primary negotiations with the counterparts, and then we identify the needs, and only then we provide the ability for the potential importer and the Russian manufacturer for the contact. And stage number three is the support during the negotiation process. So we provide support up to the moment the contract is signed in the country of presence, and it happens where we have our representative offices abroad. As for the support and logistics, we always used to provide the services in terms of consulting and calculating the best routes. And with regards to the situation, we would say that we have reviewed the inquiries that we received in Russian Export Center, and we have relaunched this story. We provided the online consultations on logistics. We accumulate the questions from the exporters, and on the weekly basis, we arrange webinars during which we provide answers to questions, and we inform them about the situation at the moment on different logistic routes and about the situation at the border crossing where they're staffed and where the situation is quite stable. We can reorient the traffic to the free border crossing points, and thus we obtain the information which border crossings are quite free and where it is easier to dispatch. And the direction number three is the one where we have not reduced the speed, is digitization, and we are still doing this digitization of all our services. So we have launched the platform Ammo Export, where the exporters will be able not just to order the service online without bringing the hard copies to us, but the most important is that these services will provide us the opportunity to ensure a seamless communication between different government bodies and agencies. Thus, the exporter will be able to obtain this service as a single window service that they were supposed to receive from different places by collecting different hard copies. So briefly, this is it.
сейчас именно
Briefly, this is it, what we are working at the moment.
окончательно еще хотел сказать,
And in the end, I would like to say the following.
говорили сегодня на предыдущих
We were talking at the previous sessions
мер поддержки.
about the fact that there are a lot of different measures of support at the government level, at the federal level. It's great that you have measures of support at the regional level, subsidies for logistics, and here it is really very important for the exporters to orient in this field to obtain as much as information as possible, and at their own level to be able to compile this information and use different mechanisms for achievement of the best result possible and to promote their products at external markets. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Вы правильно выделили три блока основных проблем, с которыми сталкиваются участники.
You have pointed out rightly the three blocks of the things we are going to discuss today. These are the logistics situations that we have problems with now, and we have a billion tons of goods which were blocked at the western ports. In the manual regime, we're trying to solve these problems, and also the problems with the calculations, the problems with the findings of the new niche companies. The government has also launched a program which is helping the business with the informational support on this problem. Today we are having a headmaster of this service. Let's hear about the experience with which your service is currently facing and what are the problems which you are solving currently. Good day, colleagues. I'm really glad to have the opportunity to participate in this event. I'm really glad that we have such big events not only in Moscow but also here in our districts. As an addition to the colleagues, I would like to point out that we have our practical work with which we were faced a lot of times, and support that we are giving to our industries. And in the September of this year, the government of Russian Federation has stated that we are going to support our industries informationally and in import transactions. And I would also like to point out that this work has been started a bit earlier in the pilot regime and was started in spring of this year. And from this very moment, our center, on the base of our center, we have launched an information center which is about finding out the problems, the solutions to the problems. And we can also divide the problems into three groups. These are, on the first place, the problems which are connected to the logistic routes of getting the goods to the place, because from the spring of this year, all the logistic chains were destroyed, and a lot of selling companies have gone away, and now we have such a difficult situation, and it's both difficult for us and our partners. And from this very part, we have built our partnership with great big logistic companies such as Fesco, Osman, and some of the aviational companies which allow us to find optimal routes and price-wise possible ways of partnership. And because we have this partnership, we can find some optimal prices for the enterprises. The second direction is that we have to find new sellers, but we can't really speak on this topic. But anyways, on the second place is that the problem that we have now, that we have a lot of sanction restrictions, both juridically and related to companies, the companies which don't allow to get subproducts to the Russian Federation. So we have to find alternative ways of finding countries which are on the neutral, and we are trying to find partners
через свою партнерскую сеть, крупную, через
can,
десятки
from the
торговых домов, все-таки
thousands of sellers can get the stuff to this
процентов
to the Russian Federation. In the
обрабатывать.
70% of cases we have worked, they were good. We could solve it. They are related to the chemistry. They are related to some appliances, to some electronic devices, to workshops. But this is like just a small list of the things with which we are currently working. The third direction with which we are working, and now the list of problems is growing. This is the we see that
Дружественные нам страны
even the countries that were like amiable to us once, they are now having some problems with dollar and euro transactions.
2 месяца назад случай.
Because 2 or 3 months ago we had not a lot of such cases, but nowadays we see a lot of problems with such transactions, for example, in China and Turkey. And that's why we have built our partnership with the banks which are on the territory of Russian Federation and some international banks. There are more than 50 partners that recommend our business, from which banks and which structures we can allow this payment and transactions, both nationally, both dollars and euro and some other currencies. And all of those big three directions, we are controlling them all the time, and we are trying to analyze new restrictions which we are getting. And there is eighth a block of restrictions, and now we are going to get the ninth, and that's why we are controlling them. These are the restrictions which are being implemented both by the government and by the companies towards us, the Russian companies. This is why we are providing the consulting, and we are trying to help small businesses and in their attempt to avoid those restrictions. And in this kind of network which we have built throughout all the countries in the world. So if you have some questions, we can talk about them individually, and we are ready, and we will be glad to help you. And this is why we are continuing our partnership. We are currently working with Egypt, with the countries of Latin America, and we are not just doing nothing. We think that
И
we
Юго-Восточная
are going to
возможности поставок в Российскую Федерацию.
We're going to study the possibilities of supply to the Russian Federation. Thank you, Konstantin. Once again, I would like to invite you and colleagues and business to the center that we have established for solution of existing tasks and challenges. The history of industrial policy of Russia demonstrates that when we look to the east, the share of domestic skills starts to grow. And from 2014, in some branches of industry, we see the share growing by 2 or 3 times. Islamic Republic of Iran is the country that was imposed by Western sanctions for a very long while. And in April, I visited Tehran with the government delegation. I see that they are not suffering so severe hardships. Mr. Abbas, to what extent Iran is capable of developing? And what promising directions for cooperation with Russia you see? Hello, dear colleagues, distinguished colleagues and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me today. Iran, for decades, is under sanctions, stiff sanctions, but nevertheless, the economy of Iran has not deteriorated and adjusted itself to the total limitations. The first sanctions that were imposed on Iran were in the end of 1979, after capture of Iranian youth that supported Ayatollah Khamenei, the first spiritual leader of Islamic Republic of Iran. And after also after the situation with Iranian embassy and its staff. Until now, there are no diplomatic relationship and also no economic relations on official level. It's officially forbidden by, the participation of Iranian economy and investment in Iranian economy are forbidden. Any procurement of gas and any economic contacts are forbidden. And besides these sanctions are also joined by the partners of the United States, Great Britain, France, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan. And those were the first sanction packages imposed. And the second stage of sanctions started in 1996. So the American sanctions were imposed on capital investment in oil and gas industry of Iran for more than 20 billion rubles. This law is called Iran Sanction Act, and it's extended by the US presidents, and the last time it was extended in 2016 for 10 years. But if we are to speak about how Iran outlives this strongest sanctional pressure, Iran has adjusted to it, but the Americans are imposing secondary sanctions as well. So those would be the sanctions that would affect the companies of other countries who are trying to enter the oil and gas sector of Iran or supply products to Iran that could be of dual use. And for development of nuclear and military programs of Islamic Republic of Iran. That is why when Russia started its cooperation with Iran at Bushehr nuclear power plant in Iran, the Russian Federation was offered, the Russian Federation has implemented a lot of efforts to take this project out of the US sanction and to allow domestic companies to work there. Because in the very beginning, they were under sanctions, the scientific centers were under sanctions, and even the scientists who were working in the universities and who were provided equipment for the nuclear power plants in Iran, and some companies that used to produce necessary equipment for nuclear power plants. The most difficult period for Iran started from 2006, when the sanctions were imposed by the Security Council of the United Nations for development of the nuclear program in Iran. And I would like to say that unlike occupational regime of Israel, India, or Pakistan, Iran is the member of Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. From the time of Shahgate to revolution. And Iran always follows its obligations in cooperation with IAEA. From time to time, IAEA has certain questions that Iran is always capable to answer. And especially in the period of imposition of those sanctions, Iranians open their own centers for the observers from international organizations, and they support communication and contacts with them. And imposition of stiff sanctions happened within the UN Security Council. There were 4 resolutions adopted in 2006-2010. During these 4 years, the import to Iranian of nuclear materials was forbidden, as well as import of equipment, import of weapons to Iran, export of weapons from Iran, and the control over some national banks was demanded. And also, the investments were banned for the plant for enrichment of uranium fuel, and uranium mines and technologies related to nuclear weapons were all banned, as well as ban was imposed on any financial help to Iranian besides humanitarian. But as for humanitarian, nothing was done. They are just talking about this. Sanctions were also imposed on physical and legal entities, those who were involved in nuclear and rocket programs. In 2010, sanctions were expanded once again. And those were sanctions imposed on banks, transportation companies, so also inspection of vehicles in which forbidden materials could be transported. In 2010 through 2011, U.S. imposed their sanctions on vessels and tankers. And also there was a ban for access to the financial system, international financial system. And later on, it was spread on foreign banks that were in cooperation with Iran. By the end of 2011, the United States imposed sanctions on the Central Bank of Iran, and in 2012, Iranian banks were switched off from SWIFT. The European Union in 2010 also imposed sanctions on supplies of equipment for oil and gas industry in Iran and financial bans as well. And year after, they supported the oil embargo of the United States. In 2017, the United States imposed the oil embargo against Iran once again, and this embargo is still in place. And as far as oil, was almost 60% of currency income of Iran. This, of course, affected economy. If before sanction period the GDP dynamic was positive, and in the first decade of the 21st century, in some years, in Iran had 6-7% of growth per year. In general, during the decades, it was 3 to 6%, and from 2006, the sanctions were imposed. The growth was quite significant, and such rapid limitation of procurement of oil, especially from the Western companies, and so the fact that the Western companies left Iran, it resulted in inflation and also reduction of the cost from the budget, which resulted in its turn in reduction of uranium currency, of decrease of Iranian currency, and also a decrease in income, unemployment, and extremely high prices. We should say that the Islamic Republic of Iran promoted strategy of counter-sanctions. So on one hand, we have created the strategy of resistance in economy. In the first turn, it was the fact that we're trying to rely on our own efforts and import substitution and development of oil exports. So far, Iran was supposed to reorient from oil export to export of oil products. And Iran was successful. In spite of difficult situation nowadays, the oil export is a significant part of Iranian export, and as a result, it produces $30–40 billion a year. And the main industries are oil chemistry, metallurgy, and car industry. Along with that, we saw the development of chemical, pharmaceutical industry and agriculture. About 10% of oil export of Iran would be the products of agriculture. And during the stiffest oil sanctions in 2011, Iran used to import 60% of gasoline. And now it's turned into its export, and now Iran delivers its gasoline to neighboring countries. And also the way how these sanctions were bypassed. Iran adjusted to understood how to bypass sanctions. The most difficult situation started when the country was switched off from SWIFT payments, SWIFT processing, and here our orientation to Islamic banking was really very helpful. In the first turn, it was the interaction with Islamic banking without any involvement of SWIFT transaction, and also payments in national currencies, for example, with India and China. And now we are doing payments in national currencies partially with Russia. So we switched to yuan, rupee. Even in the period of stiff oil embargo, China and India reduced procurement of oil from Iran, but still they continued this. Excuse me, let me add a few facts. The government of the Russian Federation, together with the government of Iran, works on creation of the new logistic corridor, the South Youth Corridor, and we have created the roadmap. We allocated funding for this, for expansion of the infrastructure, for the crossing points, and this logistic corridor would allow to approach Indian markets and to create the competition with Suez Canal. And I think that this work will be adjusted, and we will be able to adjust all the mechanisms for comfortable business both for Iranian companies and our companies. We also consider the industrial sites in Iran, of the Bandar Abbas in Lanzali, for localization of our domestic business. And we have a lot of work ahead. Thank you very much for your attention. And now let me proceed with the next speaker. We have a very broad network, foreign network with 73 countries, capturing 93% of external trade, with a lot of representative offices. This year, decisions were made to open new representative offices in Mexico, Myanmar, the Philippines. Last year, we opened our representative office in Saudi Arabia, and also it is planned to open one in Ethiopia. Today, we have the trade representative of the Russian Federation and Arabian Emirates, Andrei Teryohin, online. They will give the floor to you. Please tell us about your trade representative office and what Russian business is interested to get from you and your colleagues in the country of your stay. So, good afternoon. Thank you for invitation to take part in such an event. Moreover, on the screen I see familiar faces. Yelena has just recently visited us in business mission. We remember her, and this was one of the business missions that visits Emirates. And I would like to say that recently, in the recent year, we see that Russian Emirates business contacts are more active. We see that these contacts between the Emirates and Russian businessmen are growing and intensified. And we receive people with different interests and preferences in our country, and our office is really created and established for provision of valuable information and clear information about how and what is supposed to be done in this country, what are the interests of this country, and what are the main priorities, and what products of the Russian company could be in demand in the local market based on the market situation and political situation and the situation in the country in general. Here I should say that Emirates are the country that, in spite of all the events happening around, is rather loyal to Russian Emirates cooperation, and our turnover has not stopped due to events happening around and the outcomes, but also has the tendency to grow in a stable manner. I'm not going to forecast the turnover. That was 5.4 billion last year, which was the largest volume of turnover with the countries of Middle East. And this year, by 9 months, we have already achieved the same volume as last year. So we can easily predict that the turnover between the Russian Federation and United Arab Emirates will even exceed the figures of the previous year. I'm not going to make any predictions, but we see a tendency to stable development of the Russian Emirates business relationships. We see such tendency. It exists. It's speeding up. And here we see some real prerequisites to it and the political will from the United Arabian authorities. And here I should mention that in conditions of pressure on this country from the partner countries, the so-called non-friendly countries, the country still has its own independent policy towards the Russian Federation. Our business faced such problems that were typical only for Russian Emirates, but also for entire external economic relations of the Russian companies. But it is here in this country where the solution of any issues, no matter how complex they are, is found. We see some issues with transactions and payments for the goods supplied from Russia. We have some issues with logistics, but the turnover is not going down, and it has a tendency to grow. What is the ground for it, and what is happening around? It's true to say that Emirates is the country which is rather loyal to trade and economic relations with the globe, and its credo and the main message they have in terms of their trade policy is the open doors for the country and for the world. Here in the Emirates, we have the world-leading branches of industry. They are allowed to come here, but the competition is rather stiff here. And in this condition, the authorities of United Arab Emirates, they declare that Emirates are the part of the multipolar world that exists nowadays, and they do not want to float in far water of those who are trying to prevail in the international policy, but they have their own independent external politics line, and it is reflected in our Russian-Arabian relationships. Our contacts are very active at business level, at political level, including the meetings of the heads of states. Maybe you're aware of the fact that not recently the president of United Arab Emirates had a meeting with Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg, and it was another impetus for development of the Russian-Arabian cooperation in general, and it was a sign for the establishment of both countries to turn towards Russia in spite of processes happening around. And we see the way how the situation is going around. You see, we have mentioned about the issues with payments. That's true that the payments in the US dollars were stopped by the banks, but this is not their fault. This is a trouble because the money used to be suspended. Part of those, due to their fear about secondary sanctions, stop the payments, but the huge percent of Emirate business finds the way out, and we always try to solve the problem. The transactions still go on, maybe via euro, where yuan that is getting more and more popular, but we're getting closer and closer to payments in national currencies, and dirham is the currency that could be hypothetically the currency. Sometimes it is called a quasi-dollar, as far as it is stiffly tied to the US dollar, very stable, and thus reduces currency risks during signing of the contracts. And so far we have the prerequisites for further cooperation, for improvement of cooperation. Via financial system, a lot of transactions go. It's like a blood and vessels of the entire process. And some of the positive decisions are taken and facilitate this process. So, and if these vessels are blocked in Russian Emirates, relationships were not evident. There were some challenges, but all of these situations were solved. And this way or another, Russian companies still supply their products. And we're very optimistic towards this because any contacts at different levels and at the level of our central banks are very active. And it accounts for the perspective of simplification of different payment procedures and discovery of new horizons for our cooperation. It has already been mentioned about logistics. That corridor that was mentioned, north-south, finally is the end point in the southern point is the Arabian Emirates, and it is actively utilized. And the more organized, the more trans-Iranian supplies go from north to south, the more products and goods will be delivered through ferries between Bandar Abbas, Dubai, Sharjah, and other ports of Emirates, and then it will be expanded. And the problems will be solved that appeared at that stage when the container line stopped the shipments from Novorossiysk. Everything was stopped except for food, but it haven't broken the process. The shipments are still in progress and are growing. It's case by case, not regular, it's not the system approach, and we're hoping for it, but the process is in place. And this corridor is effective. We see the effect. The supplies of foods have not stopped, which is extremely important for the Russian Arabian Emirates because 95% of Emirates depend on supplies of Russian food products and agricultural products because Russia is one of the largest agricultural countries in the world, and we see the prospects for these supplies. We are far from the maximum in volumes as far as Russia is still outside the supplies of grain to Arabian Emirate market and some oil and butter products. There are certain prospects, but Russian business circles have not reached understanding yet in some cases, but we see the prospects. Speaking about more serious products, without trying to neglect the features of agricultural business, as far as this is one of the most promising, but we have a lot of opportunities for pharmaceutical products. Also, we provide different opportunities for oil and gas industry and so on and so forth. And one of the reasons of some breaking in our supplies is the technical regulation. And that Emirates are very liberal. Practically, they do not have high customs duties and technical limitations. These limitations are quite traditional, and it used to be oriented on Western standards that were quite productive, and so productive for metropolia. And so Emirates were under protectorate of Great Britain, but the standards were based on this foundation. But nowadays, when the Russian companies have no access to American Petroleum Institute, to pharmaceutical standards of Europe, Emirates are turning towards us and allow us to certify our products based on our national standards and Emirates' national standards. And now the process are going on harmonizing the Russian standards and the Emirate standards, and it will allow to start the supplies of products that would be corresponding in terms of safety on one hand, and on the other hand, it will comply with the national standards that they are promoting. So this would be related to oil and gas equipment, pharmaceutical products, and other types of products, and other spheres of industry, including agricultural products that I have mentioned. As for the prospects of our relationships, it still remains quite serious, especially in the part that Emirates, being a state and economical constituent territory, were used to be a large hub from south to north and east to west, and the economical model that they have allow them to grow, and along with oil resources that they have, it's the model of transit hub, a transit point on the crossroads between north and south. And Emirates don't just enhance this topic, but they make a new emphasis on it. Earlier, it was the warehousing and stocking point for movement of the products from north to south, but now it's just the refinement and production with added value Arabian territory, and this will be the soil for growth for the national economy, and this will be a very good ground for our cooperation. And they are looking, we are looking at Arabian Emirates as the point for localization of our production to those markets which are now closed, but with Russian roots. And many Russian companies are thinking of localizing their businesses in multiple free economic zones that exist in Arabian Emirates, which are over 40. There are dedicated ones, universal ones, and we are thinking that the Russian companies could create a kind of a cluster with hypothetical industrial zone in one of industrial zones of Emirates, and the Arabian authorities are now raising these issues. And so we see this process in parallel. On the one hand, we had the political will of authorities of Emirates, and on the other hand, our business is looking for a nice harbor to allocate our capital and to start the production. And these processes are in parallel, but sooner or later, the Russian companies under the general flag, or it will be the Russian flag or EU flag, they will exist here in one of the largest zones, even though we now have a lot of Russian companies who localize their businesses here. Over 4,500 Russian companies have been registered in Emirates, and the majority of them are not just the paper companies, but the companies, they are leading their business, they're having their business. And our Arabian friends say, when you come to our country, you come to the market with 3 billion people. And this is really a point. On the way to Southeastern Africa, to Asia, up to Australia, and this is really a huge hub for movement of our products and for promotion of our products. And Russian products are in demand. We are not the majority of the turnover in the country because it's bigger and it's more significant, but the dynamics of growth that we see is not 5 or 10%. It exceeds 50% and more. In the recent years, our turnover increased by several times, and we see this trend, it's still maintained. And the agreement on free trade zone shall facilitate this process. It's going to be signed in the nearest future between EU countries and Arabian Emirates. It was declared on December 5th at the meeting of the EU member countries, and the start has already been launched. And the United Arabian Party is waiting for this moment to come, and it will allow to overcome all of the customs barriers and customs payments. And for our turnover, it will be very important, where we will have 90–95%. It will stipulate our turnover, and it will be supported actively by the United Arabian side. And the Russian companies, when they come to the Arabian market, that they will get the maximum benefits. In Arabian Emirates, they have this system of support for the Russian export. We have the trade representative office that I have the honor to be the head of. Also, any kind of consultancy help, also contact help is provided for establishment of contacts with the largest companies. Those companies that are based in the largest Emirates, in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, and so we help in establishing relationships with the government, with authorities. It is not possible to do without the involvement of the Russian official bodies and embassy and trade representative office, and also with support of the Russian business in business contacts. Business missions will be very helpful. I've mentioned them before, and these business missions are very active, coming to Emirates. And not all of them leave Emirates with contracts signed and orders received, but we hope that this volume of business contacts will be converted into contracts we're talking about, and our turnover will be growing more and more, and it will get the impetus. And as for the relationships that we have, we could speak of tourist relationships. About 1,700 tourists have already visited us, and there is a very good foundation to be demonstrated in turnover, and it made the trust between the countries stronger, and it should become the flagship in Russian-Arabian relationships, as far as United Arab Emirates are at the top of our list among all of our Arabian counterparts. And through Emirates, we have the road to other countries of the Persian Gulf and other continents and other countries of the East. So we're always happy to welcome the Russian companies here in Emirates, in Abu Dhabi, where our trade representative office is, and we're always ready to provide any support, and the companies of Bashkortostan are not an exception in this list. And because I see familiar faces on the screen, thank you very much for your attention, and I will be happy to see you in Abu Dhabi.
Большое спасибо, Андрей Николаевич, за вашу работу.
For your work this year.
Внешнеторговой деятельности появились
Our trading activity, we have new words such as friendly countries, unfriendly countries. Turkey is in the list of friendly countries. And this is the first country from the February of this year which has visited our mission businesses, which were organized in March, and the activity and the dialogue raised. And Maria Sergeyevna, I ask you to tell us about the fields which we are interested in and which Turkey is interested in. Today we had a section on this, and please tell us about it more. Thank you very much for this ability, for this
совместно с правительством
discussion here today with the support of Turkish representative in Bashkortostan. We had a session which was really effective. It was dedicated to the trading dialogue between Turkish Republic and Bashkortostan, and we shall say that the insights which were told within this session, which not only are about Bashkortostan but lots of districts of Russia, and due to us having some sanctions imposed on us right now, it also affects the economy and the relationship between Turkey and Russia. And it's great that Bashkortostan is Russia is one of the countries which has a great business with Turkey. And today I'm not here as a general president of
I'm the Vice President of the Russian-Turkish Association Business Dialogue. It was established in 2021, but the most active actions of our associations were in 2022, and we're partners for business missions, negotiations, B2B contacts, and it's nice to recognize that we are partners at the International Business Week in Bashkortostan. We cooperate with your representative office in Istanbul, and well, we'd also like to thank the Russian trade representation in Istanbul, the office in Istanbul that always provides us any kind of support for organizing our events at the territory of the Republic of Turkey. In Russia, we have a lot of successful cases that demonstrate the opportunities of involvement of Turkish capital and technologies at production facilities. You all know about these cases. This would be the Costamon, the manufacture of floors in Russia, and Okayat Chemistry, the manufacturer of sanitary chemical products. Jishkanus Alabiga produces the products with sheet metals, and also companies that invest like FS for beer drinks, Rujam glass products, and for refrigerators. And so you're absolutely correct that everyone wants to achieve quick result. But once we are working with business missions for the recent 6 months, and we arranged business missions to Turkey, and when Turkish entrepreneurs and investors come to Russia, everyone wants fast and quick contracts. Everyone wants the Turkish investor to come and localize, and it's impossible for the projects that are localized. Time is needed for them to develop, and the time should come for this company to be established. But looking at negotiation processes, one should say that we're coming close to the moment for cooperation in many branches of industry, in many spheres, and Bashkortostan approves it. And so this is the wood processing week, production of food products, other branches. We understand that in interacting with the regions, every region has some priority spheres. For Lipetsk, it will be metal processing, production of equipment. For Tyumen and Krasnoyarsk, it will be wood processing. And here we are trying to build up very intensive and close relationships with the spheres of industry, branches of industry in the Republic of Turkey, because these branches of industry are well developed, and it's really arranged to dialogue in the format of association. And I should say that association is very responsive to the inquiries from the Russian side. Business is not very positive about letters, but when they have the personal negotiations, they express their interest. So in autumn, the delegation visited the Russian Federation, the regions, and once we're talking about the instruments for communication between Russia and Turkey, I would like to identify the tasks for association, and I would like to list those because they are the tools for communication. Number one will be initiation of business communication, business missions, organization of forums, also creation of business ties between businesses of two countries, media platform for exchange of information at Russian Business Guide. We also have a dedicated session for Russia and Turkey. We have the Telegram channel dedicated to Russian-Turkish dialogue. We have a special insert in the Russian Business Guide that is called the Russian-Turkish Dialogue, and we would like to thank all of the Russian and Turkish mass media that provide support for all of our initiatives, and also talk about the projects that are coming from the Russian Federation and the business mission. Of course, B2B meetings, interregional cooperation with the support of investment projects between Russia and Turkey, the presentation of investment potential of the region of the Russian Federation for Turkish business, and also demonstration of industrial sites of the regions of Russia for Turkish investors. And I would like to tell you about the insights that I recorded this morning during our discussion. It is really very important to understand. And it was mentioned, I think it has never been mentioned before. We met in Bashkiria, and it's nice to recognize that it happened this way, and we are able to declare these insights. Arsen Ayupov, the head of the Russian-Turkish Working Group, and Kardir Bey Kurtulush, the head of the governing board of Rost Trading House, they said that it is very important to build up the ecosystem of communication between public institutions, regions, and here the associations, dedicated associations, will play a very important role. Such associations as the Trading House Rost are very important because such ecosystem will facilitate the process of communication between business representatives, because in the new economic reality we're waiting for the faster results and interesting projects. It was absolutely correctly mentioned by the RTIP chair, and this is one of the oldest association. It was mentioned by Naki Bey. He said that there are a lot of prospects in cooperation between small and medium-sized businesses, and he gave one example from Bashkiria. There are a lot of projects in tourism. We know that these projects are now being implemented not only in Bashkiria but also in Tyumen, where we participated at Export Forum, and those branches of industries that I have already mentioned. He mentioned the cooperation in these branches, and also the trade attaché at Consulate of Turkey in Tatarstan, Esme Khan. We were talking a lot about logistics. We do understand that those issues related to logistics and transfers of funds are very important at the moment. And the companies that were making their presentations during our session, they are looking at everything very optimistically, and that we need to solve all of the issues step by step. And one of the representatives said that water will always find the hole, and logistics will always find the hole and find the way out. How to provide services in logistics, having the increase in turnover with Turkey, as far as we know, that the increase in turnover was about 60%. And probably not as an advertisement, but just to trying to underlining. I would like to say that we hosted a lot of events as an association, and we tried to arrange not less than 2 events per month. And in 2023, based on our tradition, in 2022, based on our tradition, it was hosted in May in the Russian Union of Entrepreneurs and Industrialists. We hosted it at the Russian Chamber of Industry and Commerce and Industry, and this year it was hosted in a Kazan Islam Summit. It was called the International Language of Cooperation between Russia and Turkey, and this year in May at Kazan Summit it will be even larger. And we also hosted the events in industrial segment in introducing the industrial sides, also interaction in pharma, in construction segment, and in order to accelerate, I would like to tell you that we have reported on the survey that was provided by the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs. It was reported by Savelyev and partners about the investments to Russia. But to be quick, I would tell you that Bashkiria also confirms that the main investment was associated with the construction sector, and now we see that the new branches of industry are being opened for this, for the opportunities. A lot of events have been taken place. We had the meeting with the representative of the Russian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We see a lot of prospects not only in construction segment, which is now #1, but we also see a trend that almost in all of the industrial platforms and export forums, we have sessions and discussions dedicated to Russia and Turkey, and we could see the results that could make us more effective from the point of view of association and the building of the dialogue between Russia and the Republic of Turkey. Thank you very much. Maria?
С нами на связи из Москвы сенатор.
Today we have the Senator Konstantin Dolgov, and he was lucky to join us even though we moved in terms of time schedule. Konstantin, can you hear us? Thank you very much, dear friends. I don't know.
Отлично, отлично.
So can you see me? Thank you very much for participation. I know that you're a long-lasting partner of Minpромторг, of our Ministry of Industry and Trade, and a lot of initiatives that we implemented with your active participation were successful. And I would like to ask you, as far as you're the member of the Federal Assembly, what do you think about our activities in support of the external trade activities?
Thank you very much for having me. In general, export and support of foreign economy is a priority in our work in the Federal Council. Thank you very much for this high appraisal of our work and cooperation with the Ministry of Trade, the exporters. Russian Export Center is our good friends, and with Marina Nikishina we're in permanent contact. And of course, it's clear that today we need to fill the domestic market with everything necessary in the situation of sanctions. It's an undisputed priority. Together with the government, with the regional administration, together with the community, we're trying to find the necessary solutions. But we never forget about export. Export means workplaces, additional investment, money, and of course, it means strengthening of our positions in the world economy, in the world trade. And we have very strong positions in terms of export. Now I'm talking about non-energy export, because in energy and power, no matter how they are trying to push us away from the world system, this is not possible. This is not happening. People are already, as we say, the collective West shoots at the Europeans, and they shoot themselves, not in their own, but sometimes they have a shoot back at themselves. So they have their own dynamics. In terms of non-energy export, yes, last year was hard indeed, but the decrease is not as serious as everyone forecasted. And secondly, for the whole list of items, I'm not mentioning agriculture. We are exporters and we are strengthening our positions, but I mean some other areas of non-energy export, we are showing very good result, and it's a consequence of our collective work. We should fix it, we should solidify it, but we understand very well what we're talking about, both traditional markets and promoting our products in the markets which have not been yet explored by our exporters. And now there are some new opportunities while they try to block us, cut us from the West to their own disadvantage, but that stimulates us to look for new partners. Let's say in non-Western countries. And here we have very huge perspectives and partners and continents. I would like to, I am meaning Africa, Latin America, Asia, Asian Pacific. It's very dynamic still from the point of view of economy and industrial development. Of course, support is important. We need to get institutions in supporting export in place. Now we are in a dialogue with our closest partners, and we're supporting that in the Federal Council. We are trying to, we're going away from dollar and euro dependence, and that's a very important question. That's important for the sovereignty and security over the states in the mid-term perspective, in observable perspective. That's how it's perceived. And there is a very serious progress here, but we need to have continuous work with our closest partners. See how detailed dialogue is going on in the gas supply sphere, which I've mentioned in the beginning of my speech. For example, with Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, we have mutually beneficial projects there, but this requires a very detailed, very sophisticated dialogue, even with the closest partners. We need to discuss, not to say a broader circle of countries, what is actually required. We need to get innovational resources involved. They're innovational for us, but not for the world. Switching to full cycle contracts, full life cycle, post-sale service of our equipment and products. When we talk about machinery and engineering products, we are to provide that. That's not easy because they are trying to make it difficult for us to make the process of payments sophisticated, to block them. And here, anyway, there are some additional opportunities. So I cannot mention everything due to confidentiality issues. It's a sensible information. But during our operational consultations, day-to-day consultations, we usually choose tools and means, and we understand that there are opportunities to go around those restrictions and open new methods to get them involved. What we're talking about is formulating new regional financial centers. We're talking about a very important task is long investment loan programs. These are some additional financial instruments, including long-term loans for investment. It's a great opportunity for exporters when implementing large-scale projects in the friendly markets. Very important subject. Trying to make Russian system of certification be acknowledged, be adopted in the world, in the Europe, making sure that the certificates of our laboratories are accepted by the R&D centers abroad. I'm sorry for being late today. I had a meeting at the Federal Council in online mode. It was dedicated to artificial intelligence. Just the day before yesterday, we had a very interesting meeting for digital maturity. And this IT sphere, in the broadest sense, including artificial intelligence, it's one of the most far-reaching areas of our high-tech expert. It's important to solidify it, to provide the necessary assistance. Let's see what kind of tools we have. Such an instrument as transportation subsidy. Is it efficient? Yes, of course. I think it's one of the most demanded. Logistics subsidies, it's one of the most demanded measure of support in terms of expert. Let's see what could be done. Anything similar, measures of support in IT. I mean, not just some tax mechanisms, but non-taxation methods. Also a very important subject. And I mean, going back to the Russian Export Center, its branches throughout the country and abroad and in our country. A very important mechanism is, it's quite understandable that Russian Export Center helps both in export and import. That's the question of time. It's hard to separate one from another. This system of warranties, the system of insurance, which was built in Russian Export Center through XR system, it's demanded now like never before. And it's used in those areas which, and it's a demanded, highly demanded tool. It wasn't demanded before, but now it's very popular. Well, maybe some work on manpower is required. Maybe we need to have a larger team, but it's a tool of Russian Export Center. It's the development institution, one of the most efficient, to my mind, and it requires the largest support of the government. And the Federal Council gives that kind of support to other two institutions which are also in the system. And it's a very important experience. This export support experience, it's also a product. It's a kind of a product. We can share that, to be sure, and promote and encourage European and Eurasian countries. We can create mechanisms for export support to the advantage of not our mutual trade only, but also our coordinated politics with our partners in third country markets. This is what is important, including digitalization of those spheres. Here we have made a significant progress, I mean domestically. And we shouldn't forget that support of export, the system we built, which proves its efficiency, this is also a very serious export product to the advantage of our exporters. I would like to wrap up the discussion. I wish you good luck. I have another meeting which I need to attend online and on television, but we are your partners, the Federal Council, the subject of support of export and foreign economic relations now and in our spring session of the Parliament. It's one of the priority issues. So we continue our cooperation with Denis Manturov and the ministry he represents of trade. Thank you so much to you for this 24/7 framework of exchange of information. I will mention Russian Export Center again, and my colleagues in business associations, with our joint efforts today, we have all the opportunities to support our exporters, but I haven't mentioned the trade representative office. trying to bring them together, bringing consumers and manufacturers together, let them know each other. And it's a huge field, huge space for improvement. We will be doing that for sure. And I'm sure no sanctions are an obstacle for us. And because for a whole number of areas, we have a very serious competitive edge. But that's not to comfort ourselves. These advantages may disappear. The competition is fierce in the world markets. But absolutely, for sure, this should stimulate us to be aggressive, if you wish, in a positive way. Aggressive policy in a complementary way in the world markets. Thank you so much. Thank you as well for participating. You are actually not late. You are absolutely within the agenda, irrespective of the fact that you were not present initially. Actually, you made a great conclusion to the session. Thank you so much as well. Dear colleagues, looks like we have covered the agenda of our session regarding foreign economic activity. Let's hear some questions from the floor. Would you please introduce yourself? The question is to all of you, to all the speakers. I have a thought circulating. Are the partner companies ready to switch to national currencies? For example, Turkey, Iran. What is your appraisal? What is their readiness status to refuse from using dollar and euro and to replace them with domestic currencies? Already a number of contracts we have concluded in national currencies. I haven't mentioned in my presentation what we have branch office in Turkey, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Belarus, and we pay them under the contracts in national currencies. We open accounts in national currencies and we pay using national currencies. I will add, yes, your question is absolutely right. Settlement of accounts in national currencies remains the only possible way to pay for the shipped and purchased goods. This work is ongoing. Today in the press, we've heard that about 40% of payments already are affected in national currencies. This is a tough question because the countries should have certain trade balance and let's say exporters, when they purchase something, or importers, it should be insured with a certain amount of income, profit. And this work is ongoing. And greetings, dear colleagues. My question will be addressed to everyone. So, is addressed to everyone. What is the role of WTO in new reality? Please share your opinion. We keep working with WTO. The world economy of this year demonstrated lots of violations of trade, which were actually imposed by the European bureaucrats. And I think that WTO framework should be used to dispute some of the decisions on sanctions, for example, used against us, and continue working with them. That's my opinion. Andrei Fartunin, Bashles Timber Company, transportation, processing of timber, shipment by railroad, transport of end products. We are present in Central Asia, Afghanistan, Korea, Europe. Well, I would like to use this opportunity to express the most sincere and hearty gratitude to the assistance comprehensive assistance which the Ministry of Foreign Economic Activity and Congressional to you, Lena. Well, maybe you are a model for us. You sacrifice your personal time very often, and I'm greatly thankful to you for your assistance. And when Andrei was giving a word to us as an exporter, well, I could say that at least half, 50% is your achievement. And I will talk about some negative things now. The Ministry of Trade and Industry, when there was a trend for the increase of construction materials, including timber that we work with, under the lobby of the Association of Timber Accommodation, Timber House Construction, they introduced a temporary measure, but there is nothing more stable than something temporary. And still, there is a strategy to exclude our codes from the measure. I don't mean 4404, that is quite 4407. This is the export code of products. Why was it left out from the support? This is not the time when Russian timber processing industry actually has the new life. We have a feeling that you are working against yourself. This is a very serious index. And question number 2 is transport collapse, which is made not by Western bureaucrats, but our own colleagues in European Union. I will explain. Now, Kazakhstan Railroad introduces a restriction based on paragraph 74, where at the border crossing, there is much less of them in the register. You cannot transport cargo not only to the territory of Kazakhstan, but also transit cargo to Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. So why are our friends, our AK friends, are providing such restrictions for us? We've lost a lot of orders because of that. Car transportation is restricted. Well, okay, fine. So the railroad transport is completely paralyzed. We spent between 2 or 3 weeks. We have declared cargo. We cannot ship it. So I will answer right now. Yes, it's a very critical problem, which is being solved right now. It came to be just lately. Yes, the railroad transportation is available, but there is a collapse in. I call the customs office every day, but it's very hard to do this even on a daily basis. They have some kind of administrative measure not to let the car go through railroads and car in. Lena, if you may, I will comment. Today we talked to the head of our Volga Region Customs Administration, Mr. Pugachev. Tamoshny is not against. With customs, it's okay. While Russian railroad company, which not due to some capacity restrictions in terms of customs crossing, but it's the Kazakh railroad company which is not willing to accept. They don't want to let through. The Ural region also faces the same problem, and the geography is quite high. Kazakhstan won't let our cargo in. Just yesterday, we had a meeting with vice mayors participating. This will be resolved shortly, I'm sure, in a promptly manner. Dear colleagues, if no more questions, then as a conclusion, I would like to say that
участников
The amount of participants of our forum
равно
is equal to the amount of participants of last year. I mean foreign states, including Western countries. These are the realities of 2021 and 2022, which means that all the attempts of political administration of West, all the attempts trying to remove Russia from business chains, they are not successful. The parallel import have been already acclaimed by the Europeans that they are efficient. So our joint efforts in this work on the support of foreign economic activities, business support, given the results, it's doomed to success. Thank you very much for your participation and attention.